Emily and Ryan had been married for 5 years. They were a happy couple, but there was one thing missing: a child. They had been trying for many years, but it seemed like it was not meant to be. Emily was deeply affected by their inability to have a child. She felt like she was failing as a woman and a wife. She would often cry herself to sleep, feeling hopeless and alone. Ryan could see the pain in his wife's eyes, and it broke his heart. He would hold her in his arms and tell her that she was not alone. "We are in this together," he would say. "All we need to do is exercise patience and trust that God's plan will unfold." Emily would look up at Ryan, her eyes filled with tears, and nod in agreement. She knew that she had a good husband who loved and supported her. Ryan's words of encouragement gave Emily the strength to keep going, even when it felt like all hope was lost. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, Emily and Ryan continued to face the challenge of not having a child. But they never lost faith in each other, and they never gave up on their dream of starting a family. One day, Emily's mother-in-law, Mrs. Thompson, showed up at their house unannounced. Emily was taken aback by her sudden arrival, and she could sense that something was off. Mrs. Thompson walked into the living room, her eyes fixed on Emily. "So, you're still not pregnant?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. Emily felt a lump form in her throat as she tried to explain. "Mom, we're trying. It's just not happening yet," but Mrs. Thompson was having none of it. "You need to carry my grandchild," she shouted. "Time is no longer on my side. I want to carry my grandchild before I join my ancestors." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as Mrs. Thompson continued to berate her. "If you can't do the job, then leave my son alone. I can get him another woman who will bear him a child. A woman who is fruitful, like me." Emily broke down in tears, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom, please understand. I'm trying. I'm not a bad person. I don't know why this is happening to me," but Mrs. Thompson wouldn't listen. She just kept shouting and ranting until Ryan intervened. "Mom, stop. This isn't right. Emily is my wife, and I love her. We'll have a child when the time is right. We just need to trust in God." Mrs. Thompson turned on Ryan, her eyes blazing with anger. "You're a fool," she spat. "All your mates have 2, 3 kids. And you're sitting here with a barren woman. You don't even know if she'll ever give birth." Emily felt a fresh wave of tears wash over her as she listened to Mrs. Thompson's cruel words. She felt like she was all alone, like no one understood what she was going through. Ryan's face turned red with anger as he confronted his mother. "Mom, I didn't invite you to come here. What are you even doing in my house?" he asked, his voice firm. Ryan shook his head. "You always come unannounced, causing problems between me and my wife. I don't want to see you here again. Please leave." His mother's face contorted in anger. "You're throwing me out of your house because of that barren woman," she spat. "I carried you for 9 months, and this is how you repay me." Ryan's anger boiled over. "I don't care about any of that right now. Just leave my house and go back to your husband's house. When the time comes, my wife will give you a grandchild." His mother's face turned red with rage as she stormed out of the house. Leaving Ryan and Emily in peace, Ryan turned to Emily, who was still crying, and wrapped his arms around her. "Forget everything my mom just said," he whispered. "I believe that with time, God will answer our prayers. The doctors have declared that there's nothing wrong with us, so we just need to trust in God's timing." Emily looked up at Ryan, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I feel like I'm failing you." Ryan's face softened as he looked at his wife. "You're not failing me," he said. "We're in this together, and we'll get through it together." One faithful day, Emily's friend Rosemary visited her, Rosemary's visit was a welcome distraction for Emily, who had been feeling down about her inability to get pregnant. The two friends sat down in the living room, chatting and laughing as they reminisced about old times. As they talked, Rosemary asked Emily the question that had been on her mind since she arrived. "Emily, what's going on? Why haven't you been able to get pregnant all these years?" Emily sighed, feeling a mix of emotions. "We've been trying, Rosemary. Ryan and I have been trying for 5 years now. We've gone to the hospital for fertility tests and everything, but the doctor says there's nothing wrong with us. We're just waiting for God's time." Rosemary raised an eyebrow. "God's time? You're still waiting for God's time? Emily, you need to wake up. Men are not patient. They want results now. If you don't give your husband a child, another woman will." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, feeling a sense of unease. Rosemary leaned in, her voice taking on a serious tone. "Haven't you been hearing about all the stories on the internet? Men who promise to wait for their wives to get pregnant, but end up getting another woman pregnant instead. You need to be careful, Emily. You don't want to lose your husband to another woman." Emily felt a surge of fear, but she quickly pushed it aside. "What do you want me to do, Rosemary? The doctor says there's nothing wrong with us. We're just waiting for God's time." Rosemary shrugged. "I don't know, Emily. But you need to do something. You can't just sit around waiting for God's time. You need to take action." Emily's eyes narrowed as she asked Rosemary, "What do you want me to do? What's the solution you have in mind to save my marriage?" Rosemary's voice took on a calm, matter-of-fact tone. "I think you should go and see another man. Just to know if you're really the problem. Forget what the doctors are saying. All you need to do is go and get pregnant, then come home and tell Ryan that you're expecting." Emily's jaw dropped in shock. She rose to her feet, her voice trembling with anger. "Is this what you came here to tell me? That I should cheat on my husband? All because I haven't gotten pregnant yet?" Rosemary shrugged. "I'm just trying to help your marriage. You're not getting any younger. Emily. If you don't do something about it, another woman will come along and snatch Ryan from you." Emily's face twisted in disgust. "Even if Ryan gets another woman pregnant, I don't care. I'm his wife, and no one can take that away from me. I'll never do what you're asking me to do. If not for our friendship, I would have asked you to leave my house right now." Rosemary's expression turned cold. "Fine, remain a barren woman then. See if I care. Your marriage is clocking 6 years, and you're not doing anything about it. To hell with you and your husband and whatever it is you're looking for in life. I'm done with this conversation." Emily's eyes flashed with anger. "Yes, you're done indeed. You're free to leave my house." Rosemary stood up and walked out of the house, leaving Emily in tears. Emily broke down in uncontrollable sobs, her body shaking with grief. She cried out to God, her voice hoarse from sobbing. "Oh God, please forgive me. Please answer my prayer. If there's anything I've done wrong, please forgive me. I promise to praise you all the days of my life. Please, just give me a child." She repeated this prayer over and over, her words interspersed with sobs. She begged God to have mercy on her, to forgive her for any sins she may have committed. She promised to be a good mother, to love and care for her child. As she prayed, Emily's mind was filled with thoughts of her husband, Ryan, and how she didn't want to lose him to another woman. She thought about the pressure from her mother-in-law, her friends, and even Rosemary, who had suggested she cheat on her husband. The thought of it all was too much to bear. Emily cried out to God, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, God, don't let me lose my husband. Don't let another woman take my place. I'll do anything, just please give me a child. As the night wore on, Emily's tears finally began to subside. She lay on the floor, exhausted but still praying. She knew that she had to keep faith, to believe that God would answer her prayer. And so, she continued to pray, her heart filled with hope and her spirit renewed. On evening, Ryan sat at the bar with his friend, Alex, nursing a cold beer. Alex had been his friend since college, and they had always been close. "What's going on, man?" Alex asked, nodding towards Ryan. "Your marriage is approaching 6 years, and there's no kid on the way." "What's happening?" Ryan sighed, taking a sip of his beer. "We've been to the doctor, Alex. We've done all the tests, and everything is fine. The doctor says it's just a matter of time." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Just a matter of time? You've been waiting for 5 years, Ryan. Don't you think it's time to take matters into your own hands?" Ryan shook his head. "I'm not going to cheat on my wife, Alex. I love Emily. And I believe that we'll have a child when the time is right." Alex laughed. "You're still waiting for God's time, huh? While you're waiting, another man might just snatch your wife away from you." Ryan's face turned serious. "I'm not going to let that happen, Alex. We are committed to our marriage, and I believe that Emily is the right woman for me." Alex nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "All right, man. If you believe that, then I support you. Let's just hope that God's time comes soon." The two friends clinked their glasses together and took a sip of their beer, laughing and joking as they discussed the ups and downs of marriage. That night, Ryan and Emily lay in bed, their minds filled with prayers. Ryan was thinking, "God, please put a smile on our faces. We have everything we need: money, business, and love for each other. But this problem of not having a child is tearing us apart. Please, God, do something to bring us joy." On the other side of the bed, Emily was praying silently, "Oh God, please don't let another woman take my husband away from me. Do something to put a smile on our faces. We will praise you all the days of our lives if you give us a child. Just one child, God. That's all we ask." As they lay there, they looked at each other, and Ryan asked, "What's wrong, Emily?" Emily shook her head. "Nothing, Ryan. Just thinking." Ryan nodded, and they cuddled each other, holding on tight as they drifted off to sleep. Both of them were hoping that their prayers would be answered, and that God would bring them the joy they so desperately desired. As they slept, they held on to each other, their hearts filled with hope and their minds filled with prayers. They knew that they had to trust in God's plan, and that He would answer their prayers in His own time. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Before they knew it, their marriage had clocked 6 years. One day, Emily started feeling dizzy and weak, despite all the home treatments she tried. Her husband, Ryan, was worried and decided that they should go to the hospital for a checkup. At the hospital, the doctor conducted a medical checkup on Emily. To their greatest surprise, the doctor announced that Emily was 2 months pregnant. They couldn't hold their joy, and they hugged each other tightly, tears of happiness streaming down their faces. The doctor's congratulations were lost on them as they were too busy celebrating. They danced and kissed, not caring that the doctor was still in the room. Their hearts and souls were filled with joy, and they couldn't wait to share the news with their loved ones. As they returned home, they celebrated with all their hearts. They thanked God for answering their prayers, and they praised Him for His goodness and mercy. They knew that this was a miracle, and they were grateful for it. That night, they sat down together, holding hands, and thanked God for the gift of a child. They promised to be good parents, and to raise their child in the fear of God. They knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, and they were excited to see what the future held. As soon as the news of Emily's pregnancy spread, their family and friends were overjoyed. They had all been waiting for this moment for so long, and finally, it had arrived. Everyone was looking forward to meeting the new addition to the family, and they were all sending their best wishes to Emily and Ryan. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's pregnancy progressed smoothly. She and Ryan were both excited and nervous about the upcoming arrival of their baby. They had prepared the nursery, bought all the necessary baby clothes and toys, and were just waiting for the big day to arrive. Finally, the day arrived, and Emily gave birth to a beautiful, bouncy baby boy. Ryan was overjoyed. And he couldn't stop smiling as he held his newborn son in his arms. Emily was also thrilled, and she felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as she looked at her baby boy. The news of the baby's arrival spread quickly, and soon their home was filled with family and friends who had come to congratulate them and meet the new baby. Emily's mother-in-law was particularly overjoyed, and she couldn't stop crying tears of happiness as she held her grandchild in her arms. The celebration continued for days, with everyone coming to visit and congratulate the new parents. Emily and Ryan were both thrilled and exhausted, but they wouldn't have traded this moment for anything in the world. They were finally a family of 3, and they couldn't wait to see what the future held for them. 2 weeks after Emily gave birth to the child, one night the baby cried uncontrollably, giving Emily a sleepless night. The following morning, Ryan left for work, leaving Emily to care for the baby. After feeding the baby, Emily laid him down to sleep, and she decided to catch a few winks as well. Exhausted from the previous night, as she slept, Emily rolled over, unknowingly sleeping on top of the baby. The weight of her body was too much for the tiny newborn, and he couldn't breathe. The baby died instantly, suffocated by his mother's weight. Emily slept for a few hours, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred. When she finally woke up, she was met with a horrific sight. She had slept on top of her baby, and he was no longer breathing. Emily was consumed by grief and guilt, and she cried out in anguish. She tried to wake the baby, but it was too late. The baby was gone, and Emily was left to face the devastating consequences of her actions. She cried bitterly, whipping herself with guilt and regret. How could she have been so careless? How could she have slept on top of her own baby? The thought of living without her child was unbearable, and Emily's world was shattered into a million pieces. She didn't know how she would face Ryan, or how she would ever forgive herself for this tragedy. Ryan returned home in the evening, exhausted from a long day at work. As he entered the house, he was met with a sight that made his heart sink. Emily was sitting on the couch, crying uncontrollably. Her body was shaking with sobs, and her eyes were red and puffy. Ryan rushed to her side, concern etched on his face. "Emily, what's wrong?" he asked, trying to comfort her. "Why are you crying like this?" But Emily couldn't talk. Her sobs were too intense, and she couldn't get any words out. She just pointed to the bedroom, trying to indicate that something was wrong. Ryan's confusion turned to alarm as he rushed to the bedroom. And then he saw their son, lying motionless on the bed. Ryan's heart stopped as he touched his son's body. It was stiff and cold, and Ryan knew that something was terribly wrong. He rushed back to the living room, his face ashen with shock. "Emily, what happened?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "What happened to our son?" But Emily just cried, unable to speak. Ryan's eyes filled with tears as he realized that their son was gone. He felt like his world had been shattered into a million pieces. As the minutes ticked by, Ryan's grief turned to anger. He glared at Emily, demanding to know what had happened to their son. "What killed him?" he shouted. "He was healthy when I left for work. How could he just die like that?" Emily, still reeling from the shock of her son's death, struggled to find the words to explain. But before she could speak, Ryan's anger boiled over. "What did you do to him?" he yelled, his face twisted in rage. "What did you do to my son?" Emily, terrified of Ryan's anger, tried to defend herself. I didn't mean to," she stammered. "I was sleeping, and I rolled over onto him. I didn't know, I didn't realize," but Ryan was beyond reason. "You killed my son," he screamed, his voice echoing through the house. "You're a witch. How could you do this to me? To us? We've been waiting for this child for 6 years, and now you've taken him away from me." Emily, consumed by grief and fear, collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Ryan's anger had become a living thing, a monster that threatened to destroy them both. Ryan's anger and grief consumed him, and he continued to lash out at Emily. "You've ruined my life," he spat at her. "You've taken away the one thing that mattered most to me. Who knows if you'll ever conceive again? Who knows if a child will ever come to you again?" He sneered at her, his eyes filled with contempt. "I made the greatest mistake of my life by marrying you. You're a witch, Emily. You've come to destroy my life." Emily cowered under Ryan's verbal abuse, her body shaking with sobs. She had never seen Ryan like this before, and she didn't know how to react. Finally, Ryan stormed out of the house, leaving Emily alone in her grief. The news of the baby's death spread quickly, and soon their family and friends were gathering at the house to offer their condolences. Emily's mother-in-law was particularly distraught when she heard the news. She rushed to the house, tears streaming down her face. "My grandchild," she wailed, "my poor grandchild." Her eyes were filled with sadness and concern as she looked at Emily. "What happened, my child?" she asked gently. "Tell me everything." Emily's mother-in-law, fueled by grief and anger, began to verbally abuse Emily. "You're a witch," she spat. "You've come to destroy my son's life. How could you, a mother, carelessly roll over and lie on your newborn baby? You're a monster." She turned to Ryan, her eyes blazing with anger. "Chase her out of your life, my son," she demanded. "She's a curse, a bad omen. She'll bring nothing but misfortune to our family. Find yourself another wife, one who will give you many children and care for them properly." Emily and Ryan were both too stunned to respond. They just sat there, crying and shaking their heads. Emily's mother-in-law continued to hurl insults at her, calling her a barren woman and a child killer. "You're an evil person," she spat. "God has given you a child, and you've used your witchcraft to take it away. I regret the day we came to your village to pay your bride price. My son will never end up with you, I promise you that." The verbal abuse continued, with Emily's mother-in-law showing no signs of relenting. Emily and Ryan were both traumatized, unable to defend themselves against the barrage of insults. Emily's mother-in-law stayed in their house for a week, and her presence was a constant reminder of the tragedy that had occurred. Every morning, she would remind Emily of how she had carelessly killed her own son, her grandchild. The verbal abuse and guilt trips took a toll on Emily's mental health. After her mother-in-law left, Emily was left alone to grapple with her grief and guilt. She had lost her parents at a tender age, and Ryan had been her rock, her only source of comfort and support. Now, she felt like she was losing him too. One day, Emily sat alone in the sitting room, surrounded by the eerie silence of the house. She thought about her life, about the struggles she had faced, and about the tragedy that had befallen her. She asked God why he had allowed such a thing to happen to her. Why had he given her a child, only to take it away? Tears streamed down her face as she thought about Ryan, about how much she loved him, and about how much she didn't want to lose him. She prayed to God, asking him to grant her another chance, to give her another child, and to restore her marriage. As she prayed, Emily felt a sense of desperation wash over her. She knew that she couldn't lose Ryan, not now, not ever. She was willing to do anything, to pray, to fast, to beg, just to have another chance at happiness. Ryan's behavior changed dramatically after the loss of their son. He started drinking heavily, going out in the morning and returning late at night, reeking of alcohol. He wouldn't even talk to Emily, just stumbling into the house and collapsing onto the bed. Emily was devastated by Ryan's behavior. She felt like she was losing her husband, and she didn't know how to stop it. She tried to talk to him, to reason with him, but he just pushed her away. As the days turned into weeks, Emily became a shadow of her former self. She lost weight, and her eyes lost their sparkle. She felt like she was all alone, like she was shouldering the burden of their grief by herself, despite everything. Emily didn't blame Ryan for his behavior. She knew that he was hurting, that he was trying to numb his pain with alcohol. She felt guilty, like she was the one who had caused their son's death. As she lay in bed at night, listening to Ryan's snores, Emily felt a deep sadness wash over her. She knew that their marriage was on shaky ground, and she didn't know how to save it. She felt like she was losing everything, like her whole world was crumbling around her. One day, Ryan was drinking in a bar when his best friend, Alex, walked in. Alex was surprised to see Ryan drinking alone and decided to join him. As they sat down, Alex noticed that Ryan seemed troubled. "What's wrong, man?" Alex asked, concern etched on his face. Ryan sighed, taking a swig of his drink. "It's just, I don't know how to deal with what happened," he said, referring to the loss of their son. Alex listened attentively, nodding his head. "I know it's tough, Ryan," he said. "But you can't let it consume you. You have a wife who needs you, who loves you. You need to be there for her." Ryan shook his head, feeling a pang of guilt. "I don't know, Alex. I just feel so angry and hurt. I waited 6 years for that child, and then Emily just carelessly." Alex interrupted him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Ryan, listen to me. I know it was an accident. I know Emily didn't mean to hurt your son. And I know you're hurting, but you can't let that hurt turn into anger and resentment towards your wife." Ryan looked at Alex, feeling a glimmer of understanding. Maybe Alex was right. Maybe he was being too hard on Emily. "What should I do?" Ryan asked, feeling a sense of desperation. Alex smiled, his eyes filled with compassion. "Go home, Ryan. Hold your wife close. Console her. Make her feel loved and safe. And then, together, you can start the process of healing and moving forward." Ryan nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude towards Alex. He thanked him and left the bar, determined to make things right with Emily. Ryan arrived home that day, determined to make things right with Emily. As he entered the living room, he saw Emily crying on the couch. He approached her, asking, "What's wrong? Why are you crying?" Emily looked up at him, her eyes red and puffy. "It's like I'm in this alone," she said, her voice shaking. "Since we lost our child, you've been distant. You barely stay at home, barely talk to me, barely play with me. My whole world has crumbled." Ryan felt a pang of guilt and regret. He realized that he had been taking out his grief and anger on Emily, instead of supporting her. "I'm sorry," he said, taking Emily's hands in his. "I was wrong to behave that way. I know what happened was an accident. And I shouldn't have blamed you." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I know I made a mistake," she said. "But I didn't mean to. I love you, Ryan, and I love our child. I would never intentionally hurt either of you." Ryan pulled Emily into his arms, holding her tightly. "I love you too, Emily," he said. "And I'm sorry for blaming you. Let's put the past behind us and move forward. We'll get through this together." As they hugged each other, Ryan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that he had been wrong to blame Emily, and he was grateful that they could work through their issues together. After a few moments, Ryan pulled back and looked at Emily. "You know, I was thinking, maybe we should try again. Maybe we should try to have another child." Emily's eyes lit up with hope. "Really?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded. "Yes, really. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to try if you are." Emily smiled, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I'm willing to try," she said. "I promise to be more careful next time." Ryan smiled back at her, feeling a sense of hope and renewal. "I promise to be more supportive," he said. "We'll get through this together." As they hugged each other again, Ryan knew that their days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Before long, Emily conceived again. 9 months flew by, and Emily gave birth to a set of bouncing twin boys. Ryan was overjoyed, and the news spread quickly to their family and friends. Everyone was ecstatic, including Ryan's mother, who had previously been so critical of Emily. She rushed to the hospital, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Praise God," she exclaimed, thanking Emily for giving her another chance to see her grandchildren. As she held the twin boys in her arms, Ryan's mother whispered to Emily, "Please, don't be careless this time. I know I called you all sorts of names before, but I promise to help you care for these babies. I'll stay with you and help with the nighttime feedings, so you won't get tired and accidentally roll over on them." Emily was touched by her mother-in-law's words and promises. She felt a sense of relief and gratitude, knowing that she would have helped caring for the twins. When they brought the twins home, they celebrated in a big way. Emily was overjoyed, knowing that God had answered her prayers and given her another chance at motherhood. She felt grateful for her husband's love and support, as well as her mother-in-law's change of heart. As they sat at home, surrounded by their loved ones and their precious twin boys, Emily felt a sense of peace and happiness wash over her. She knew that she still had a long way to go, but she was ready to face the challenges of motherhood with courage and joy. Emily sat on her bed, gazing lovingly at her twin babies. She couldn't help but feel grateful for her husband, Ryan, and the love they shared. Yes, indeed, she thought to herself, it is very good and nice for a woman to marry a man who loves her and who she loves. Love is the pillar of everything in marriage. Without love, there is nothing. Just then, Ryan walked into the room, a curious expression on his face. "Why are you looking at our twin boys like that?" he asked, sitting down beside her. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with happiness. "Oh, my lovely husband, I was just thinking about how much I love you and how much I believe in the power of love. I believe that love conquers all. And that it has conquered everything we've faced in our marriage." Ryan's face softened, and he took Emily's hand in his. "My lovely wife," he said, looking deep into her eyes, "without you, I am nothing. I believe that marriage is for better or for worse, and that we should always hold on to love, no matter what challenges we face." Emily's heart swelled with emotion as Ryan spoke. She knew that their love was strong enough to overcome anything, and that they would always be there for each other. As they sat there, holding hands and looking into each other's eyes, Emily knew that their love would continue to grow and flourish. And she knew that she would always cherish the love and the family they had built together.